Hey peeps, Tyler here with my Disability Pride Month book recommendations part 3, the last part for now. It is raining and storming outside if you can hear it, the window's open, and I'm doing this on my tablet because the power's been going out a lot and I might scream if I try to do this on my desktop because of the heat. It was going out when it wasn't even storming a lot because of the heat wave. And now it's just storming on top of it. And not so many times yesterday. Anyway, gonna get into it. The books will be listed in the description, as well as timestamps. So, the first one I have here is The Pretty One by Keah Brown. On life, pop culture, disability, and other reasons to fall in love with me. I apologize for the glare. From the disability rights advocate and creator of the Disabled and Cute viral campaign, a thoughtful, inspiring, and charming collection of essays exploring what it means to be Black and disabled in a mostly able-bodied white America. Keah Brown loves herself, but that hasn't always been the case. Born with cerebral palsy, her greatest desire used to be normalcy and refuge from the steady stream of self-hate society strengthened inside her. But after years of introspection and reaching out to others in her community, she has reclaimed herself and changed her perspective. In The Pretty One, Brown gives a contemporary and relatable voice to the disabled, so often portrayed as mute, weak, or isolated. With clear, fresh, and lighthearted prose, these essays explore everything from her relationship with her able-bodied identical twin called The Pretty One by friends, to navigating romance, her deep affinity for all things pop culture, and her disappointment with the media's distorted view of disability, and her declaration of self-love with the viral hashtag Disabled and Cute. By smashing stigmas, empowering her community, and celebrating herself, Teen Vogue, Brown and The Pretty One aims to expand the conversation about disability and inspire self-love for people of all backgrounds. Another review, I read this in 2021, actually. I initially read it on Scribd, which is now Everend, and as you see, I've gotten a physical copy since then, though I haven't actually read it. I haven't reread it, but this book is a memoir/essays by a Black disabled woman with so much honesty, truth, and power in the pages. Honestly, I wish I knew how to describe it, but all I can say is the effect it had on me, an AFAB disabled person. I don't know what it's like to be Black. I learned a lot from this book, from where I didn't relate personally, but also from where I did, with being disabled, though with different medical issues, as well as the talk about depression and suicidal ideation. It showed me that, though I've already been working on having disability pride and unlearning internalized ableism, as someone who has also been disabled my entire life and always will be, I still have a lot more to learn/unlearn. Some of it felt like a much-needed punch to the gut. It wasn't easy to hear some of it, but I know I needed it. This was incredibly emotional for me, and some of it I'm just like, how do I get there? I'm still working on a lot of things, but life is a journey, and as long as I'm working on it, that's what matters. I'm also about the same age as her, so some of the references to pop culture was a bit nostalgic for me. I need to make a list of books I read, loved, and don't own, and need to buy my own copy and put this on the list, which, as you can see, I did. Sorry about that. With the window, I closed the window because it got so loud with the storming. Like, can you even hear me over that? Hopefully. Now the window's closed, but it decided to get even louder. So yeah, I loved that book. I do need to reread it and annotate it at some point, because I remember how much I loved it. So the next book, How to Be Autistic by Charlotte Amelia Poe. Winner of the Spectrum Art Prize. I wanted to show the side of autism that you don't find in books and on Facebook. My story is about survival, fear, and finally hope. There will be parts that make you want to cover your eyes, but I beg you to read on, because if I can change just one person's perceptions, if I can help one person with autism feel like they're less alone, then this will all be worth it. In her urgent, funny, shocking, and impassioned memoir, Charlotte presents the rarely shown point of view of someone living with autism. As we follow her journey through school and college, we become as awestruck by her extraordinary passion for life as by the enormous privations that she must undergo to live it, from food and fandom to body modification and comic conventions. Charlotte's experiences through the torments of school days and young adulthood leave us with a riot of conflicting emotions: horror, empathy, despair, laugh-out-loud amusement, and most of all, respect. And a quote that I actually can't read because of the color. That red on gray, like, I literally cannot read that. But I also read that on Scribd, now Everend initially. This autobiography of growing up unknowingly autistic is amazing. So heartfelt, honest, and raw. I related to some of it. It can sometimes be depressing, and I cried reading it, but it's also full of hope and happiness. Just keep reading. And I also kept bouncing from happiness while reading it. I honestly wish everyone would read this, whether you are autistic or not. It's for everyone. You'll either see yourself and or see another autistic person, since autistic people are not a monolith, or get to understand autistic people a little better. And I just have some quotes here. There's no bravery without fear, no courage without that awful lump at the back of your throat and the turning of your stomach. As an autistic person, we cannot rely on body language or facial expressions the way a neurotypical person would, but we are very in tune with emotions. The problem is an excess, if anything, of empathy. We feel your anger, your pain, your sadness, and then we overload, and we don't know how to handle that. I chose the title because I thought it was funny. There's no one way to be autistic. There are millions. Every autistic person is their own person with their own identity, and I wanted to get that message across. My experience is my experience. It might not have been yours, but we might have shared some of it. It's really dumb, but it's true. Living a happy life after trauma really is the biggest fuck you that you can give to the person or people who hurt you. I love those quotes. And then one I have on Kindle, so I cannot show you, is Haben. I don't know if I said that right, my apologies. The Deaf-Blind Woman Who Conquered Harvard Law by Haben Girma. Born with deaf blindness, Girma grew up with enough vision to know when someone was in front of her and enough hearing to know when someone close to her was talking. However, she had difficulty reading facial features or distinguishing people in group conversations. Relying on her problem-solving skills, Girma overcame roadblocks while simultaneously obtaining her undergraduate and then law degree. In the process, she developed new methods of communication and found her calling in advocating for the deaf and blind communities in more accessible communication, education, and employment opportunities. As a lawyer and advocate, Girma shares a collection of vignettes illustrating the defining points in her life. She peppers her writing with a witty sense of humor and showcases her strength in facing obstacles, along with challenging antiquated societal beliefs about people with disabilities, whether describing her experience climbing Alaska's Mendenhall Glacier or helping a drunk friend get to his dorm by using her seeing eye dog that he adores as a lure. And my review was, this is a wonderful autobiography. I loved stories from her life was told, how stories from her life was told in the pretense tense. It felt so much more personal. It's also infused with humor. You can learn so much from this in an accessible way and having a nice time while doing it. Please read the discussion questions at the end as they give food for thought. I have also been disabled my entire life, but for entirely different reasons. I was born with Factual Association. I have a playlist on it. I am neither deaf nor blind. I do have auditory processing disorder, though, so when she mentions there was too much noise to make anything out, I relate to that, as I cannot make anything out in those situations either. She's the first deaf-blind student to graduate Harvard, and she's barely 6 months older than me. We still have so far to go, but that's not meant to take away from how far we've come. So I loved that one. Then I initially actually listened to this, which is narrated by the author on Libby. And of course, loved it so much I had to buy a copy. Also, I have not reread it, otherwise it would probably be annotated. But I initially listened to this, narrated by the author, and I freaking loved it. It is Golem Girl, a memoir by Riva. My apologies. Winner of the Barbellion Prize and finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. In 1958, Riva is born with spina bifida at a time when children like her are not expected to survive. Riva endures countless medical interventions, trying her best to be a good girl and a good patient in the quest to be cured. Everything changes when, as an adult, Riva is welcomed into a group of artists, writers, and performers who are building disability culture. Their work is daring, edgy, funny, and dark. It rejects tropes that define disabled people as pathetic, frightening, or worthless. They insist that disability is an opportunity for creativity and resistance. Emboldened, Riva asks if she can paint their portraits, inventing an intimate and collaborative process that transforms the myths she's heard her whole life about her body, her sexuality, and other measures of normality. Golem Girl is a memoir unlike any other, gloriously illustrated, which actually I didn't look at the illustrations. I need to do that at some point, since I listened to it. Embracingly honest, each page humming with the vivid cinematic prose of a visual artist, and the warmth and playfulness that defines all of Riva's work. Though I do remember it had audio descriptions in the... I believe it had audio descriptions in the audiobook. This unforgettable story empowers us to imagine a world in which bodies flow among all possible forms of what it is to be human. I don't have much of a review, but I said this is one of those books I wish everyone would read. I loved listening to her and learning her story. I need more memoirs like this by disabled people. So yeah. Queer, disabled. I think I gave all of, well, except for the next one. But another one I have on Kindle, so I can't show it, is Spectrum's Autistic Transgender People in Their Own Words. Written by autistic trans people from around the world, this vital and intimate collection of personal essays reveals the struggles and joys of living at the intersection of neurodivergence and gender diversity. Weaving memoirs, poems, and first-person narratives together, these stories showcase experiences of coming out, college and university life, accessing healthcare, physical transition, friendships and relationships, sexuality, pregnancy, parenting, and late life self-discovery to reveal a rich and varied tapestry of life lived on the spectrums with humor and personal insight. This anthology is essential reading for autistic trans people and the professionals supporting them, as well as anyone interested in the nuances of autism and gender identity. I can't fully explain in words how much I loved this anthology. It's basically mini memoirs of different autistic queer people. Every single one autistic and queer like me. Every one in their own words. It was like a warm hug. I saw myself in so much of it. Of course, we're all different. Neither autism nor queerness are a monolith. But of course, all being queer and autistic, there was a lot to relate to. So much of what I related to, I used to feel all alone about. I didn't know I'm trans until I was 30. I was nearly 32 when I realized I'm autistic. I went 30 plus years without knowing either of them, though I did consider myself being trans long before 30, but I thought it was a sin and I was already too much, being multiply physically disabled and queer, and weird as I put it at the time, as I now know, autistic. So I pushed those feelings back, stuffed them down, tied them up, and gagged them as much as I could, until I couldn't anymore. The autism? Well, I had no freaking idea what autism meant, beyond false stigmas and stereotypes. I realized I'm autistic through becoming an avid reader in my mid-20s, and relating to character after character after character, none of them explicitly stated as autistic. But again and again, I'd see autistic people saying, "Those characters are autistic like me!" because of their autistic traits, that I didn't know were autistic traits at the time. And while that was frustrating, because back then I was like, I'm not autistic! What was downright depressing was I also saw all the non-autistic people reading those same books and hating those same characters for those same traits that I related to because autistic. I couldn't help but think, do you hate me too? Eventually that happened so many damn times. I went, okay, fine, I'll look into this autism business already, jeez! And so I did. And then I couldn't stop learning all I could about autism, and following autistic people on YouTube, Instagram, and elsewhere, and reading up on autism, which led me to realizing I'm autistic, and now I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be me now. I'm in my mid-30s, I'm 35 now. It was a journey to get to this point, and the journey isn't over yet. It's not over as long as I'm still breathing. Anyway, I love that book so much. I actually read it in December, so less than a year ago, December 2023. I apologize if there's something I said that you can't hear because of the storm. But it shouldn't be too much longer. I have here QDA, a Queer Disability Anthology. So another anthology. Featuring fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and comics by 48 writers from around the world, QDA, a Queer Disability Anthology, proves that intersectionality isn't just a buzzword. It's a penetrating and unforgettable look into the hearts and souls of those defiant enough to explore their own vulnerabilities and demonstrate their own strengths. Queer sexuality and disability places me so far outside the realms of the everyday that it renders people silent. Jackie Brown. QDA is a gathering of people with the transformative and political power of love that transcends gender and ability. Ignorance is the biggest barrier. I feel exhilarated that you might actually accept me as a sexual being, that you might see the deliciousness that is my disability. Andrew Morrison Gerza. An anthology often creates a community. In this respect, QDA is truly groundbreaking, because it brings two wonderful communities together. There is not a single style, genre, or opinion in the book, but an orchestra of voices. Their seminal works mirror and do not mirror each other. Taken together, they light a brilliant path of honesty. Jennifer Bartlett, co-editor of Beauty is a Verb, the New Poetry of Disability, which I actually have on Kindle and have not read. I should do that. This one, I didn't say a whole lot, but I did say some, as it mentions a mix of nonfiction, fiction, poetry. There's a comic, 48 contributors, 97 stories. I did rate each one, and it equaled out to like 3.62, which I rounded up to 3.75, because some of these really struck me hard and personally, which, you know, on Goodreads is just a 4. But you can actually do quarter stars on Storygraph. But some of these really struck me hard and personally, all by people who are queer and disabled like I am. I'm so very glad I read this and highly recommend it. It's a very diverse range of voices and mix of different things, nonfiction, fiction. So, yes. And last but not least, I don't actually have a whole lot to say because I made a whole video on it recently, and that is Unmasking Autism by Devon Price, Discovering the New Faces of Neurodiversity. I freaking loved this very much, as you can see with all the tabs. I will link the video in the description because I do a whole long review on it, so I'll just link that in the description if you want to check that out. But I will read. For every visibly autistic person you meet, there are countless masked autistic people who pass as neurotypical. Masking is a common coping mechanism in which autistic people hide their identifiably autistic traits in order to fit in with societal norms, adopting a superficial personality at the expense of their mental health. This can include suppressing harmless stims, papering over communication challenges by presenting as unassuming and mild-mannered, and forcing themselves into situations that cause severe anxiety. Also, they aren't seen as needy or odd. In Unmasking Autism, Dr. Devon Price shares his personal experiences with masking and blends history, social science research, prescriptions, and personal profiles to tell a story of neurodivergence that has thus far been dominated by those on the outside looking in. For Dr. Price and many others, autism is a deep source of uniqueness and beauty. Unfortunately, living in a neurotypical world means it can also be a source of incredible alienation and pain. Most masked autistic individuals struggle for decades before discovering who they truly are. They are also more likely to be marginalized in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, class, and other factors, which contributes to their suffering and invisibility. Dr. Price lays the groundwork for unmasking and offers exercises that encourage self-expression, including celebrating special interests, cultivating autistic relationships, reframing autistic stereotypes, and rediscovering your values. It's time to honor the needs, diversity, and unique strengths of autistic people so that they no longer have to mask, and it's time for greater public acceptance and accommodation of difference. In embracing neurodiversity, we can all reap the rewards of nonconformity and learn to live authentically, autistic and neurotypical people alike. So, that is the last of my disability book recommendations for the moment. Let me know if like the video if you liked it. Comment if there's any recommendations you have. It doesn't matter if it's fiction, non-fiction, any disability related books. If you've read any of these, let me know your thoughts. Share, subscribe, hit the bell if you want to. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.